Okay, great. So we've spent about the last 35 minutes going through the why, who, and the how of performing an IT security risk assessment. So to help put some of the elements of the how into perspective, we thought we'd walk through the handling of a few sample risks. So what we're doing is we're going to essentially assume that you've identified the key risks, you've performed the gross risk analysis phase, and again, in our methodology, that includes the workshop with the key stakeholders and basically takes you through the first two phases of the project. So now we're ready to assess the quality of the mitigating controls. So to set the stage for this exercise, in this slide, you can see that we have a sample gross risk map. And what we have are, I think it's about 30 to 33 little red dots, which represent the risks. And then on the left-hand side of the slide, we have listed the top 10 risks, and that's based on likelihood and significance. Now, the three risks that we're going to highlight for this demonstration are highlighted in red, and they are as follows. They're portable devices and laptops, number 27, super users, which is number 3, and then logging, which is number 8. And, of course, we have drawn the arrows so that you can see exactly where those risk dots lie on our gross risk map. So now that we've created our gross risk map, the next step is to assess the quality of the mitigating controls, because this analysis is going to drive our final net risk map, which we'll see here in just a few minutes. So as we look at the mitigating controls for each of these items, you have to, first of all, document the results in some kind of a basic tool or even a more sophisticated product. But theoretically, an organization should use some type of tool in order to update the mitigating controls on an as-needed basis and, of course, to show improvements to the overall control environment over time. And what I can tell you from past experience is that the identification of mitigating controls and the documentation of them is a challenging task, and it's certainly one of the more time-consuming tasks. So, trying to identify the controls and which controls are key controls and determining how much time you should allocate to identifying them and then documenting them in this format, again, that can be somewhat challenging and a little bit time-consuming. But with regards to our three risks, if you look at logging, you can see that this organization in the mitigating controls column is basically sending Windows Server logs to a central log server, and then automated email alerts are sent for certain conditions or events. However, there's no logging, or at least minimal logging, for many of the key application systems. So using our scale, again, it's a 6-point scale, we've assigned the quality of this control at a 2.0. So that's really more of the middle of the road in our scale, and technically it would be classified as repeatable, but may not be consistently applied. Our next risk item is portable devices and laptops. Now, in this case, we have a couple policies in place. The organization restricts the use of portable devices. However, any authorized ones must be encrypted. And then laptops are also encrypted, and access to laptops is controlled through a dual-factor authentication device. So these controls are much stronger than those related to logging. So we assign the quality of this control at a 3.5. So that's really between our defined and managed category in our scale. Now, finally, we have our super users. Now, we didn't provide the details for this risk. However, what I can tell you is that there are very limited controls in place to restrict the number of super users within this organization. There are a lot of super users on the systems and nothing formally documented in terms of policies and procedures. The controls are fairly weak, and the quality of this control is only a 1.0, which is initial and ad hoc. So, let's see what happens when we apply our mitigating control rankings to the risks. So before we look at our new net risk map, I just want to go back very quickly to the gross risk map. Now, as you can see, there we go, look at the dots for our gross risk map, you can see that they're tightly bunched in that 5 to 6 range for both the significance and likelihood. So now as we look at our net risk map, you can see that the risk dots have separated and the likelihood has decreased. And of course, we would expect this change and this separation of risk once we've taken into account the controls in place to mitigate each of the risks. Let's more specifically look at our 3 sample risk items. We'll start first of all with number 3, our super users. Again, the controls were pretty weak with that risk, and therefore the risk did not move very much. Moving over to risk number 8 for logging. Now we had pretty good controls in place, which actually caused the risk level for this item to go down a fair amount. However, if you look at our top 10 risk list on the left-hand side of the slide, you can see that risks 3 and 8 are still in our top 10 risk list. But now let's take a look at our portable devices and our laptop risk. Remember, we had really good controls in place in which those controls significantly lessened the risk for this item. The risk dropped way down like a rock, all the way down to, it looks like about 2 on our rating scale. And so that risk was reduced so much that it's no longer in our top 10 risk items. As Johan said earlier, the risk management plan is a critical component of the process. Because once we've identified the high-risk items, we need a plan to further mitigate those risks and to validate the quality of the controls. Otherwise, it would be difficult to expect improvements to be made to the control environment. So in the case with our example, we have a sample risk management plan illustrated, and it illustrates both the one-time efforts and the ongoing efforts. So if you look at our 2 risks that still remain somewhat high, the logging and the super user risk, you can see that we've incorporated them into the risk management plan. So if you look at the top, our one-time efforts, we actually have 2 recommendations for logging. So the first one here is item number 2, which basically states that we recommend the development of policies and procedures and a logging strategy for application systems. And then at the bottom of that one-time plan, item number 10, we recommend implementing an automated logging tool, something like Security Audit Manager. And then as we look at our super user risk, we've identified one recommendation for that one where we recommend establishing security standards and procedures for super users. And now as we go down to our ongoing efforts, we have one key recommendation, and it's related to super users. And what we're recommending is to perform periodic reviews of super users. Now, it's a straightforward task that really shouldn't take the organization very long to perform, but it's an important activity because the organization should want to ensure that the new security standards for super users have been properly implemented and those users are limited.